So this Zach Lavine trade thing has been on the internet for about the last week or so, and I figure why not do a video about it. The obvious thing is that Lavine's contract is up after next season, and maybe the Bulls just wouldn't want to give him a $34+ million contract, and they would want to move him instead. Now, that said, the Bulls recently came out and said they're not looking to move Lavine right now. I think my take on it is if the Bulls gave Lavine a max contract, I wouldn't kill him for it, assuming that they didn't lock themselves into other contracts as well. So, for example, the Markkanen deal, which they did not agree to an extension on, of course. If they plan to give Lavine a max, and then they also go and give Markkanen like 20-something million this offseason, then I think it starts to be a little iffy, because then you're basically locking yourself into this team, and there's a chance they end up having an awesome season, but as of right now, they're a few games under 500, and I mean, they're not as bad as they look to open up the year, we'll give them that, but they're still not that good. Now, of course, that does mean you might have to let Markkanen walk in free agency or organize a sign and trade, and honestly, a similar conversation needs to be had about Wendell Carter Jr., who some of it is injuries, some of it is bad coaching, but he just has been a bit of a disappointment based on how good he looked as a rookie. Now, I know there's a big conversation about, well, how good is Zach Lavine and all that, and I mean, look, he's basically putting up 50, 40, 90 on 27 points a game right now. It's pretty damn good. Yeah, his passing, I mean, it's technically better. Like, his assists are up, his turnovers are also up. Defensively, he's pretty okay on the ball as a team defender, rotations, communication, all that stuff. Doesn't do as good of a job. I think just because a guy is not the number one dude on a championship team, it doesn't mean that you can't have him on your team. I mean, there's only like 4 dudes in the whole league who can lead a team to a championship, so chances are you're not going to get one of those dudes anyway. And I think the main thing with giving Lavine a contract, again, assuming that you don't also lock yourself into a whole bunch of guys and then you're suddenly just this same team but more expensive, is it still gives you the opportunity to build this team up and get to, 45 wins. And the best way to do that is to make a big leap on defense. And, Patrick Williams could be an awesome defender. Maybe Wendell turns a corner there, or you acquire some defensive center in a way. And then you become a free agent destination, because we must remember, this is the Chicago Bulls we're talking about. This is one of the most storied franchises in the NBA. They are always at the top of the league in attendance per season. I do think free agents would recognize the impact of having a really good team in Chicago and being the heart of that. But for the Bulls to do that, I think you have to put yourself in a scenario again where it's like that potential free agent, whoever it may be in the future, could be like, well, Zach Lavine's really good. He can be my number 2 guy. And of course, the Bulls would have to leave open max contract space, which is possible even if you give Lavine a max contract himself. It's just, again, don't go and then give Markkanen $22 million a year or something, unless Markkanen proves to be worth that much money. But let's say the Bulls disagree with everything I just said, and they're just like, nope, we're trading Lavine, that's it. Honestly, there might be better odds of the Bulls using Lavine in a trade to get somebody better than him, as opposed to the Knicks giving them some picks and stuff, I guess. But to talk about the Knicks, because they've been the team most connected to Lavine, I guess. I mean, do we think they would give up R.J. Barrett? I don't think so. They do have those Mavs picks, but I'm just not really sure who the players moving would be. I mean, would Julius Randle be a huge get for the Bulls in their eyes? I don't know. I think RJ would, but again, I don't think the Knicks would be moving him. Emmanuel Quickley, I don't think the Knicks want to move him, and at that point, I just don't know if there's really a move there, unless the Knicks would just want to offload a whole bunch of picks. Philly has been talked about, I think, with Lavine. Have I seen that on Twitter? I feel like I have. I mean, would they move Ben Simmons for Zach Lavine? I don't think Daryl Morey would do that. I mean, he would have done it for James Harden, but of course Zach Lavine is not Harden. And then if it's not going to be that, then you're looking at some expiring contracts, young players, plus picks type of trade from Philly. And I think the only way that's possible is if the Sixers would be willing to include Tyrese Maxey. If they didn't put him in there, I don't think the Bulls would consider that one. But, if it was some sort of like Danny Green's expiring, Tyrese Maxey, and I don't know, 2 firsts, maybe 3 firsts. There would have to be some swaps in there and everything. Then maybe that gets you Zach Lavine. The Bulls would have to really like Tyrese Maxey, but he has had some moments already this season. 2 teams that I've seen talked about outside of the Knicks and the Sixers for Lavine, if we get to that point, Dallas and Denver. Both teams are kind of compromised with trading picks. The Mavericks can move picks starting in like 2026, so that's kind of rough if they want to go that far out. Denver has some picks that they can move in the short term, so maybe that makes their odds a little better. Would the Nuggets give up Michael Porter Jr. for Zach Lavine? I guess if they wanted to go that route, Michael Porter Jr. probably the best asset Chicago could get for Lavine. You could argue that Denver needs a defensive player more so than another scorer, but I don't know. Lavine is very good, and his fit on offense with that team, I think it would make a lot of sense. And after those 4 teams, I think it gets a little tougher to find a Lavine deal because you have teams who, to me, could use Lavine, but they don't want to move picks because they're not good. For example, Orlando. You're not going to get Vooch. They probably would be okay with giving you Gordon, but would the Bulls even view Gordon as that much of an asset for Lavine? Probably not. Maybe Toronto could use Lavine given that they're in kind of a weird transition period right now. But they're 5 games under 500. They don't want to give up draft picks. Same thing with Miami. They're 6 games under 500. Even then, they weren't content with giving up the farm for Harden. And sure, it would be a fraction of the price for Lavine, but I feel like they wouldn't want to do that either. You know, Tyler Hero, Robinson, Achua, that sort of thing. The Pelicans, of course, have a lot of draft picks from the AD and the Drew moves, so maybe there's something there. Perhaps it's Lonzo and some picks as the starting point for Lavine, and there could be something there. But again, it does get difficult because you quickly get to the situation where it's like who's willing to give up picks, you know? I mean, I feel like Lavine to San Antonio, that's kind of interesting, but the Spurs should not just be thinking about offloading draft picks, even if they are having a pretty good season so far. Now, maybe the Spurs are that one unique team where they have enough good young players to where the Bulls could be like, well, maybe we'd be a little more okay with not getting a pick back because you could just give us like 3 exciting young dudes. But even then, I think the Spurs like their guys too much to do that. Like, I don't think they would want to give up Keldon Johnson and Lonnie Walker and Devin Vassell for Zach Lavine, you know? But to reiterate again, if the Bulls give Lavine a bunch of money after next season, or potentially this offseason, then I'm not going to kill them for it, assuming they leave the rest of their financial options open.